Hi, and welcome back. I'm Mike Quincy.
I'm Kelly Funkhauser.
And I'm John Linkove.
So the car on tap for today's podcast, your favorite podcast and mine, is the 2023 Toyota Crown. This is Toyota's replacement of the Avalon, a vehicle that was liked and admired by many of us here at Consumer Reports. We rented a super swanky two-tone platinum version from Toyota. And Mr. Linkove, I'm going to throw to you, and you can please tell us, does the Crown get the royal treatment?
No, not from me. Not from me. Like you said, it's a replacement for the Avalon. I'm happy to see the Avalon move along, shuffle off, because I just didn't like the way it eventually changed to. So I know, like you said, a lot of people liked it, and I know like Keith Barry and Jeff Bartlett, a number of people really liked that experience. The Crown is kind of different, and I don't know if it's because of the target audience now is getting older. It's a sedan, so that's a dying market to begin with, and not in people in the sense of just sedans are dying off. But, it was a low vehicle. It got lower over the years. It got more swoopy. So the Crown is sort of like an SUV. It's a little raised up. It has a bigger greenhouse, a little easier to get into the seat. It's sort of like a step across versus a step down into the car. The Platinum one you mentioned, so it's a hybrid max powertrain, turbocharged, 4-cylinder, 2.4 liter turbocharged 4-cylinder, 340 horsepower. EPA says estimated 30 miles per gallon. The regular versions, and we're going to be buying one of the regular versions, that gets a 236 horsepower, 2.5 liter 4-cylinder. Big difference, CVT, whereas the Max gets a 6-speed automatic, and that and the turbo engine, they work really well. The CVTs tend to, and we haven't driven this obviously with the CVT, they tend to accentuate the roar of the engine.
They get a little noisy sometimes.
Exactly. But the weird thing is, again, going back, it competes against cars like, and good notes that some of these notes that you gave us, Acura TLX, Cadillac CT5, Chrysler 300, Dodge Charger, Nissan Maxima, a category that's going away.
Right.
No more 300, no more Charger, no more Maxima. So
right.
It's why you don't see this sedan. It's an interesting vehicle, but it's going to be, I think, polarizing because it's not a sedan, it's not an SUV, and it's got the two-tone, and it's a hybrid. It's kind of trying to be all things to all people.
Well, it's kind of like you have a performance hybrid. You also have a green aspect of the hybrid technology because, as we've seen with a lot of car makers, sometimes they're going to accentuate performance, sometimes they're going to accentuate fuel economy. But what it comes down to is kind of the livability of this car. Now, we've had some interesting evolutions of Toyota's interiors, their infotainment systems. You spent some time with it, Kelly. Why don't you give us an idea of what it's like inside the car?
Yeah, it definitely feels more luxurious in the realm of Toyota, right? So, it's not your entry-level Camry or Corolla per se. The interior feels more sophisticated, quiet, smoother, and it has a large, screen in the middle. So it's got a big display, which will be helpful. Again, depending on who the target audience and buyer is of this vehicle, perhaps that's something they'll want. But overall, it feels like a more elevated Toyota, just in general. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, it's got the general Toyota controls and displays and everything. So it's going to be familiar, especially to previous Toyota owners.
A few hard buttons along with the touchscreen.
Yes. So the little things in life that we actually really appreciate, right? Mm-hmm. So those types of things. So yeah, it's going to be familiar and comfortable, especially if someone's looking for a new car equipped with all of the latest and greatest safety features, but wants something still, comfortable that they may have had. And like John, you said that this market or this sector is kind of dying, right? And so this is still a viable option if you're looking for that. Here's one. Yeah,
and to your point, Kelly, it's as if it's kind of the Buick of Toyota's lineup. So you have Chevy, Buick, Caddy. The three tiers. Buick is luxury, but luxury light. This has like a Lexus feel, sort of like a Toyota Venza. It's nicer, like you said, not a Camry feel, not a Corolla feel, definitely, or anything like that. It has, for example, like the double hinged armrest, center armrest that you only saw in Lexus.
Right.
So it's in here, but it's a little flimsier feeling.
Right, but it's little details.
Little details, right. So you have this kind of mid-level, a person who may not want to make that statement of Lexus, or they want the value of Toyota. And I mean,
reliability of Toyota.
They want the reliability of the brand of the Toyota family, and they want to save money. So Lexus, for example, you can get a Lexus NX for the same base price, front wheel drive Lexus NX for the same price as the entry level Crown. But that only comes with the first and second complimentary scheduled maintenance services. One at 6 months, 5,000 miles, one at 12 months, 10,000. That's it. Toyota, you get 2 years of scheduled maintenance, 2 years, 25,000 miles. You just get more for your money with this vehicle. So I could see why people want a little nicer, but without going to the luxury dollars, luxury brand, that Lexus level of cost and appearance.
Yeah, but isn't it a tough sell to tout like scheduled maintenance? Like, it's a Toyota, it's a Lexus. It probably isn't going to need a lot of maintenance.
Exactly. How much are you going to end up using?
It's not like you're selling an Alfa Romeo or something like that, where that could be a real factor.
But maintenance and reliability will separate. So you're not going to go there and know the service writer because they should be reliable,
right?
But oil changes, you could get banged for $100 here. If it's fluid change this, cabin filter there. You walk out $300 for basic maintenance just to keep it, and not even keep it running, just doing the basics to it.
Right.
Yeah. So 2 years of that, you save $700,000, $800,000 versus, okay, you get a couple at 6 months and 12 months. That's really the infancy of the car.
It's not exactly a new model, right? The Crown has been in existence in the past, but it is, kind of quite a bit of an overhaul, right?
Right.
And so the first year,
it's an old name.
It's an old name, but exactly. So the first year of any model, there's higher likelihood that you're going to need to do something. So that does come, definitely factors in.
Certainly.
Now it's interesting because we're bringing up the comparison to the Avalon, which some people would suggest was kind of an old person's car. I mean, that, call it what it is. You compare it to kind of like a Buick. So with the styling of the Crown, it's pretty jazzy, and it's Toyota's attempts to get younger, but if they still have an older audience. And John, you brought up a good point about the Crown being higher off the ground, easier to get in and out of. But I would counter that helping an older driver, because I found that the visibility in the Crown really wanting. The sloped rear back has very limited rear visibility. I thought the whole cabin was very confining. The dashboard was higher. The door sills seemed higher, certainly compared to the Avalon. So wouldn't the styling approach, I think, of the Crown hurt an older buyer?
I think some of it is seat positioning, because I know, and not like I'm stalking you, but knowing getting into cars after you drive, you sit in a much more upright, raised position than I do.
Right. I'm kind of like Jake Fish. I sit close and high.
So I sit kind of vertically, but I sit lower to the ground, lower down. So it didn't bother me as much. But then again, we'll talk to someone like Jeff Bartlett, who, his build, his waves, he always comments on vehicles that he has a really hard time because he's like long in the torso and short in the legs. So his seating position is different. It is a reason why you go and you drive these. You don't just put an order in and get it. Right. I think that if you were a person who was happy in the Avalon, you would appreciate the changes in the Crown, but you may not like the styling of it because it's out there compared to an Avalon. I don't appreciate the Avalon. I didn't like the way it was because I just felt that this felt the just compressed in it. So what you saw in the Crown, I saw in the Avalon.
Interesting, because the Avalon was kind of a traditional sedan, sort of boxy-ish, but a generally a lower dash, lower sills, lots of glass area. I always felt that the Avalon was like any Honda Accord or Toyota Camry that we've driven over the last 20 years. Very open and airy, and that's. But it's just interesting. You have a different perspective on it. Yeah,
and it was the Avalon, not the Camry,
right? But
also the ES, so the Lexus ES. So I mean, it's small things like that, which again speaks to the need for test driving.
I mean, in terms of practicality, though, the Crown I think looks like a hatchback, but it isn't. It has this little trunk, a little tiny. It's not a small trunk, but it's a small opening. And when I looked at the styling, it just reminded me so much of a Honda Accord Cross Tour. But that was a hatchback, and you could lift up the back. And I'm wondering why would Toyota make it look like a hatchback but not give it the practicality?
Yeah, I'm overall a little bit confused also by the finished product, right? It's not a SUV. It doesn't have the hatch. It's a sedan, but it's definitely not, as lifted as a typical SUV. It's lower, although I think a few inches higher than the Avalon. And yeah, inside I also felt a little bit more on the claustrophobic side. I think they used the word panoramic in their preview of this vehicle, a panoramic roof. I felt that it was 3 individual small pieces of glass and not necessarily what I would consider panoramic, right? So there was a lot of, hard surfaces, and it did definitely feel a little bit more closed in. So yeah, the overall finished product, I think, has some good qualities, but also as one piece is maybe a little bit confusing to me.
In terms of the finished product, I mean, we did get a pre-production model, so you got to cut it a little slack. But for me, I noticed that there was too many bland, hard plastics. The turn signal stalks felt flimsy. There was visible mold lines and slightly rough edges on the door panels. I thought, this is not $50,000 nice. I mean, again, this is a top of the line model. It's pre-production. Yeah. But for that much money, I'm thinking I want it to look a little bit nicer inside.
Well, I would say that it's a good example of the touch points in the cost versus the technology, because has full ADAS feature set. It's not even like the Toyotas where you have to add on an option to get blind spot. Kelly, you could speak to that in greater detail, but also the powertrain. I mean, it's whether it's cost, whatever it is, it's positioned as a premium product because of the technology with it, and the visible stuff looks good. But I think it's more and more common now, whoever the manufacturer is, that it's the below the eye line stuff is where you see the cost cutting.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a premium product for Toyota, right? Again, if we're not going for the badge name of a Lexus or going for those aesthetic, look at me type of features, right? Then the interior makes sense in terms of it doesn't have all of these extra wood grain and, all of this other stuff. But again, if you're looking to upgrade your vehicle for the latest and greatest technology, right? Then I think that it does make a lot of sense in terms of premium for Toyota.
Now, in terms of, John brought up ADAS, when you think about the performance that you've seen with Toyota and Lexus products, how do you think the Crown is going to do when it comes to that?
Yeah, so it has their safety system 3.0. I can't remember if it's plus or not, but Lexus uses one and Toyota uses not one. So yeah, the 3 version of it, which is their one that they've had in their past few models that have been released. So it's likely to do very, well in terms of it has a lot of things, not top of the list in terms of capabilities and performance of, lane centering and adaptive cruise control type of, next level features. But it has all of the things that you want in terms of safety and convenience. I was disappointed that they did not add a direct driver monitoring camera to this system, especially because prior to speaking with them, we had seen in one of their press images a mocked up version that did have that driver camera behind the steering wheel on the column, right? And so then confirming with them if it was going to or not, they said it will not be coming to the Crown. So definitely, a disappointment in not getting that camera. Definitely a safety system there. But it will have all of the other safety features.
But when the rubber meets the road, when we're actually driving this, one of the things that we mentioned in our first drive, which is live on consumerreports.org, is we said, kind of concluding, well, it's pleasant, but it's unexciting. And that was a statement based on the Platinum model, which has the higher horsepower engine. And I'm thinking about the one that we're gonna be buying, a limited model, which has less horsepower. Sure. And so I'm like, if the top of the line model that we drove is pleasant but unexciting, we're getting the less exciting model. Yeah. I'm not sure how that's going to pan out.
It's is it what the market wants on that spot? I mean, perhaps the bit in the jaded sense that we could say is that, look, every vehicle that comes through from an auto manufacturer is the top of the line trim. So you almost want to, I want to, and since we're not testing them, so it's not oh, this is affecting its score by that way of thinking. But like, okay, fine. You know, they're loading it up to make a good impression. But what's, like you said, rubber meets the road. Where is the real meat going to be? And it's going to be in the version we get. So maybe it's easy just to dismiss the overallness of this one not limited trim, but the one model which will sell the far fewer models, numbers, excuse me. You know, and look at this other one, like, okay, maybe that will be actually more exciting because it does everything well, competently, for a better price and gets better mileage and such. So I could see that sense of, yeah, maybe the more mainstream middle level one is going to be an exciting vehicle. And this one, just like, oh, it's trying to sell too much.
Right. I think you bring up a really, really logical, good point, because the limited model that we're going to be buying is going to get a better fuel economy. It's going to have the smaller 19-inch wheels compared to the 21s on the Platinum, which sort of looked cool, but not sure it really improved rider handling that much.
Sure, practicality, right.
But the calling card of the old Avalon was certainly its fuel economy. And at least by the EPA numbers, the new Crown isn't going to be pushing that boundary that far. So we're going to have to see how
from the Avalon hybrid.
Right. I'm sorry. You're right. Yeah. And you know, in all disclosure, that was the Avalon that many of us at the track fell in love with.
Yes.
It was, great, 42 miles per gallon overall in our testing for a pretty large, honest 5-passenger vehicle that had great reliability, not exciting to drive. I'm not going to tell you for a second that it set the world on fire.
It's very
in terms
solid.
Of,
it was very.
But I just loved the livability of this car so much. So it's going to be interesting to see when we get our test model, how our fuel economy numbers hold up, how the ride and handling are affected by the smaller wheels of the limited model, and we only can rent these cars from manufacturers for only a couple weeks, so we're going to have our test car for months and months and months. And months.
I was gonna say, if that, I mean, it was hard to get into this and not experience it. I mean, for me, I didn't experience it with my kids. I didn't experience it with my daughter and her her teammates on the lacrosse team and throwing their sticks in the back. So it could be different when you're using it like that versus just trying to kind of become familiar and getting a feel with it. Right. Which is, again, why we don't rate a car based on the 1 week with a press car.
Exactly. And that's the big difference between Consumer Reports and just about everybody else. This is a big time for Toyota. They just put out the new Prius, which was mentioned on another podcast. Personally, I like the styling of the Prius more than the Crown. But again, the same idea, very swoopy, very aerodynamic. And, so Toyota's has been busy last couple of years in their product development department. Sure. And again, this is our first impressions of the new Crown. Check out consumerreports.org for the first drive, which is live, and get an idea of exactly what we think about this one that we rented from Toyota and what might be coming soon with the limited trim that we are in the process of buying right now. And so will it be a crown jewel?
We'll find out.
Sure. That's all the Crown jokes that I can do for today's podcast. And the audience just gave a sigh of relief. So speaking of audience, we're going to move on to an audience question. We love your questions. Text 30-second videos. Send them all to talkingcars@icloud.com. That's talkingcars@icloud.com. And we have a question here from Kurt, who writes, I've noticed service techs seem overwhelmed by vehicle electronics. With intermittent problems like my Subaru Outback has, they don't seem to have the tools to diagnose those systems and refuse to accept any evidence of glitches I've experienced, videos, scan data, etc. Fully electric vehicles will only make things worse. What's your take on the situation and any solutions? So Kurt's definitely throwing it down about potential future electric problems and EVs. Kind of a bold prediction, but Kelly, what kind of answer do you have for Kurt?
Yeah, so there's actually quite a lot to unpack in that comment there. First being that it definitely sounds like he's had a rough go around with trying to solve some sort of problem he has with his vehicle. And so I talked to some of our guys in the shop here and got their input on what their experience has been in terms of diagnosing, electronics or screen infotainment related issues and what info is captured in perhaps a code that can be read and then used for diagnosing. And it kind of varies, is what I learned, is that there there are a lot of issues that throw very generic codes. And so kind of drilling down into that, especially if it's not an issue that is persistent. Maybe it's a glitch or the screen turns off or freezes or lags or something, and it kind of, sometimes fixes itself. It's definitely harder to do. But if you're having issues with getting it diagnosed at the dealer, definitely call the customer service line for the manufacturer, the 1-800 number. And oftentimes they're able to escalate the issue. They'll still work with, whatever local dealer it is. You'll give them that info and they can kind of escalate it from the back end on their side to see, if there's something that can be done. Of course, you can try another dealer if it's not too far to get to as well. And then I think the second part of that comment really was about, is this going to be a bigger problem in the future, right, with electric vehicles? And the answer is yes and no, right? So as more,
like somebody who used to work
I know, as more electronics and technology are put into vehicles, there's more things that can go wrong that can be more elusive. If they're software, they're not hardware. This nut and bolt, type of this broke. It's definitely harder to diagnose and look into. But also with electric vehicles, there's some issues that won't be as prevalent, like the nuts and bolts, right? If you don't have all of those components, then you're not going to have issues with them. So I think there's still going to be issues. There's just going to be different issues, but I don't necessarily think either that it's going to be more issues. They're just different types.
Right.
There's the software, harder to diagnose types of issues for sure.
But John, we got to have a little empathy for Kurt. Problem with the car, takes to the dealer. Dealer's like, I can't replicate.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, we all know people.
It's like going to the doctor and your symptoms go away. Exactly.
Right. Well, it's a normal spec or within spec. Is the general term. I would say so for Kurt, we don't know if it's warranty or not. So if it's under warranty, that could be an issue too. They're not allowed to spend so much time on it. If you can't replicate the problem, wipe his hands, move on to something that's going to bring in more money. Right. At that point, either try a different dealer. If it's out of warranty, definitely find a Subaru specialist. I mean, that's first off. We take my wife's MDX to a guy in town, and he's a Honda guy. So
but not a
it's out of
dealer,
not a dealer.
Not the dealer.
It's out of warranty.
Right.
It's 11 years old, but he knows. If you're doing, you're doing a timing belt, do the valve lash too. Little things like that.
Right.
But he's not selling extra things that the dealer is selling. Big upsells. I would say, in like you were talking about, Kelly, with the EVs. I think wiring will be an issue because wiring is heavy. So they go, the thinnest possible wires for weight, because there's so much wiring in cars today. That could be an issue because if there's a kinked wire somewhere during assembly, that's where you start having all kinds of weird intermittent issues that come and go. Tracking that down is very challenging. And then, the weird electronic things, the screens, et cetera, but the motor is a small electric motor that can be swapped out. You're not swapping out the gas engine,
right.
The same way. I think a lot of it just also comes down to, look, what's the manufacturer is pushing the supplier? Are they holding them over a barrel, trying to get it for the cheapest price possible? That's where you're going to run into the same type of issues that you would run into with a gasoline or a diesel powered car or whatever. If this supplier is trying to meet a price and they can't meet that price, you're going to have a problem.
Right.
Because if you look at NHTSA recalls, for example, it's not always. Many times it's the supplier realized this at some point of check and then they notified the manufacturer. It's not that they bolted the car incorrectly. It was that there was a problem with the supplier, and you want to assume it's going to be something about price. They were trying to squeeze out every penny.
Well, and I'll just reiterate calling that 1-800 number, right? Because 100%. Oftentimes, especially in our experience, right, we're bringing these cars to the dealer and they're new cars and they're unfamiliar and they don't have experience or parts or whatever. And calling that number just kind of brings it to another level of maybe they've heard this before. Your dealer has not heard of this, but maybe they have I know what you're talking about. This is familiar. This is how another dealer solved it, right? So just escalating it up just to that one level, I think, is going to be big.
And go online, go to the Subaru forums, type in your question, type in your issue. Or more often than not, you're going to find somebody else that also has the issue.
Well, to go to what you said, reporting it is great because that's the only way that the manufacturer is capturing data to free
if they don't know about it.
So they don't know about it, and that's key as well. The dealer, I mean, not to knock the dealer, but who knows where their information goes up to? You're calling the manufacturer, you're pushing it up higher for their database.
Right.
So yeah.
Right. And
good advice.
When you talk about, compiling data, looking at reliability issues, that sounds like Consumer Reports, which is what we do
definitely report it on the reliability survey. We want to know about that. Yes.
But this is what we try to do to help Consumer Reports members and our fans out there in podcast land find a good, reliable car, whether it's new or it's used. And Kurt, we really appreciate you sharing your story with us. And that is gonna wrap it up for this episode of Talking Cars, which was obviously expertly produced by super producer Dave Abrams, edited by Andrew I Really Like Hockey Belize, and of course, Anatoly the Great Shumsky. As always, check the show notes for more information of the vehicles and topics that we discussed. Just a reminder, keep your questions coming, talkingcars@icloud.com. Thanks so much for tuning in, and we'll see you next week.